Welcome to Southwest Desert, where adventure meets the arid beauty of the American Southwest. Join us as we explore the rugged landscapes, uncover hidden historical gems, and dive deep into the rich legends and culture of this iconic region. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on the latest desert adventures. Please leave a like or comment. This is very helpful. Let's journey together into the heart of the Southwest Desert. In the rugged wilderness of southwestern Arizona, where the unforgiving desert meets the Colorado River, there's a story that still echoes through the canyons. It's about a man who lost not one, but two fortunes. A man who could walk for days across terrain that would defeat modern vehicles, who knew every wash and mesa of the Trigo Mountains like the lines on his weathered palm. And yet, despite his intimate knowledge of this harsh landscape, he couldn't relocate the one thing that might have made him rich. A silver vein so pure that it glinted in the desert sun, waiting to be rediscovered. This is the tale of John Numl and his lost silver mine, a mystery that has tantalized treasure hunters for nearly a century. Welcome to Southwest Desert, where we explore the forgotten stories of the American Southwest. I'm your host, and today we're traveling to a place that time has nearly forgotten, a corner of Arizona where prospectors once sought their fortunes and where one man's frustrating quest has become the stuff of local legend. Before we dive into this story, imagine walking 6 miles through mountains so rugged that modern four-wheel drive vehicles struggle to navigate them. Now imagine doing this regularly, in your 70s, under the blistering Arizona sun. This was just an average day for John Numl, a man so accustomed to this punishing terrain that his neighbors remember him simply as a great walker. John Numl's story begins around 1880 when he arrived in the Silver District of southwestern Arizona. This area, lying between what is now Yuma and the California border, had just experienced a silver boom with the discovery of 3 significant mines: the Clip, the Red Cloud, and the Black Rock. These operations would collectively produce over $600,000 in lead-silver output between 1880 and 1889, though old-timers insisted the true figure was much higher. Numl was there when the Red Cloud mine made its initial strike. He worked as a miner, though his restless nature kept him from staying in one position for long. As the years passed and silver prices fell, the mines began to shut down. Eventually, the Red Cloud, which had been the heart of the district, fell into disuse, and Numl found himself in a new role, caretaker of the abandoned property. By the late 1920s, Numl had established a unique lifestyle that few modern people could imagine. He lived in a cabin on the Colorado River at a place called Conger Point, also known as Numl's Landing, about 75 miles northwest of Yuma. Ed Rochester, one of Numl's contemporaries, described the location as being at the end of the world's worst road. Numl's only motorized transportation was an ancient Model T truck with a worm drive. This vehicle was so unreliable that trips to Yuma often took a week in either direction. When the truck inevitably broke down, Numl thought nothing of walking 10 miles to the river, calling across to friends on the other side and continuing his journey with their help. The mine was about 6 miles from his cabin as the crow flies, or 10 miles by the treacherous road. But the distance didn't trouble Numl. During the summer months, when there was little to do at the mine, he regularly commuted between the two locations, almost always on foot. And here's where our story takes its fateful turn. On these walks, Numl developed a habit that would both lead to his greatest discovery and his greatest frustration. Each time he traveled between the mine and his cabin, he took a different route, prospecting as he went. He would knock off samples from interesting outcroppings, carry them back to his cabin, and add them to a growing pile of rocks that he intended to examine, eventually. One day, on one of these routine walks, Numl struck a ledge that looked promising. As was his custom, he broke off some samples and brought them back to his cabin, where they joined the other unexamined specimens. And there they might have remained indefinitely if not for a visit from Walter Riley, a prominent mining man from Yuma and a longtime friend of Numl's. Riley noticed something special about some of the rocks in Numl's collection. With the old prospector's blessing, he took samples back to Yuma for assay. The results were stunning. The rock contained extraordinarily high-grade silver. When Riley returned to share the news, his excitement couldn't be contained. "Where did you get that rock?" Riley demanded. "If there's enough of it, you've got a bonanza." Numl examined the samples and claimed he remembered the day, the place, and the ledge from which he had collected them. But when he led Riley to the spot, they found only worthless rock. His memory had failed him. Desperately, the aging prospector tried to recall the correct location. Several possibilities came to mind, and he methodically checked each one. None led to the silver-rich ledge. Finally, he embarked on an exhaustive reinvestigation of every possible route between the Red Cloud mine and his cabin, searching every wash, every trail, every path he might have taken. The silver ledge remained hidden. The problem was compounded by the extent of Numl's wanderings. In his decades of exploring the region, he had traversed virtually every square mile of the Trigo Mountains. He had hiked to Castle Dome Landing, to the river opposite Papago, and all the way to Cibola Valley, far upriver, where he maintained a 40-acre homestead. Given the vast area Numl had covered and the unmarked nature of his routes, it's perhaps unsurprising that he never relocated his silver ledge. The landscape he traversed was so empty and broken that no unmarked path through it could ever be retraced precisely. Even for a man who knew the desert as intimately as John Numl, some secrets remained hidden. But silver wasn't the only treasure Numl discovered in his desert wanderings. Perhaps his most unusual find was what he called his petrified turtles. According to Clyde Stewart, another local who knew Numl well, the prospector described these objects as big, just like desert turtles. They were thick through and had legs, but John couldn't see any heads. They were solid rock, but he didn't find them in rock. They were lying loose alongside the wash. What were these mysterious formations? Stewart had his theory. John said he found them in granite hills, but there must be andesite or rhyolite somewhere in that canyon, and these large geodes in the shape of turtles washed out from it. Old John talked about it so much he started believing he had some petrified turtles. Ed Rochester, meanwhile, believed Numl found them in red sandstone. He had heard from sources he considered reliable that one specimen was sent to a scientific institution, where it was identified as a genuine fossil turtle. Unlike his silver ledge, Numl knew exactly where his turtles were located. However, he remained secretive about their whereabouts. Once, on a trip with Rochester, Numl promised to show him the mountains with the turtles, but the old prospector was very elderly by then, and the side excursion never materialized. As for the lost silver mine, there seems little doubt that Numl's discovery was genuine. The Silver District was known for its rich deposits, and the old-timers who knew Numl accepted his story without question, though they differed on where his ledge most likely lay. Jose Alvarado, another contemporary, offered this intriguing possibility. A Dutchman who worked at the King of Arizona while I operated the mill there had a mine between the Red Cloud and Mojave tanks, going toward Ehrenberg. Native silver. That could have been John's ledge. Alvarado added an even more tantalizing detail. And the Indians used to bring pure silver into Castle Dome Landing, used it for arrow points. While I was at the King, an old Yaqui, a Gambesino called Placer Mike, told us, "If you fellows want silver, I will tell you a place in this country where you can load up all you want." He said he found it at the foot of a sharp peak, big vein, black on the outside, but it was almost pure silver when he broke it. John Numl continued living at his riverside cabin and searching for his lost ledge throughout the 1930s. After he began receiving a pension, he moved to Laguna Dam, where he built a shack among a community of old prospectors. From there, he eventually went to the pioneers' home in Prescott, where he died in 1948. Anyone tempted to search for Numl's silver today should consider the long and fruitless hunt conducted by the man who discovered it in the first place, a man who knew that terrain better than anyone. They should also acknowledge the deadly nature of the desert Numl traversed with such apparent ease. The Red Cloud had another caretaker after Numl, a man named Walter Nelson. Less than a month after being visited by a writer in 1955, Nelson was found dead beside his car, which had stalled in deep sand 5 miles down Red Cloud Wash. The desert that John Numl had mastered for decades had claimed another life. "He may not have grown rich here," the writer concluded, "but John Numl mastered the land." And perhaps that was John Numl's true legacy. Not a lost silver mine, but a life lived in harmony with one of America's most challenging landscapes. He had found a way to thrive where others merely survived, to find joy in isolation, and to see potential wealth where others saw only barren rock. The Silver Ledge remains lost to this day, another entry in the long catalog of desert treasures that continue to captivate our imagination. But the story of John Numl, the great walker who twice glimpsed fortune only to lose it again, reminds us that sometimes the journey itself is the real treasure. In the unforgiving badlands of southeastern Arizona, where the Peloncillo Mountains slice through the desert like ancient teeth, human bones still emerge from the sandy earth. These weathered remains tell a story of betrayal, murder, and a $3 million treasure that vanished into the desert over 140 years ago. This is the tale of Skeleton Canyon, where death came twice for Mexican smugglers, where outlaws turned on each other like rattlesnakes, and where one of the Old West's greatest treasures remains hidden to this day. Welcome to Southwest Desert. Today, we're riding into Skeleton Canyon, Arizona, where the bones of the dead still guard secrets worth dying for. Picture the southeastern corner of Arizona Territory in 1882. This land defies human comfort at every turn. The mountains rise like dark thunderclouds frozen in stone, their peaks so treacherous that even today, experienced hikers think twice before attempting certain passes. The valleys stretch endlessly, playing tricks on the eye in the crystalline desert air. The atmospheric clarity creates illusions that defy belief. Locals tell the story of a cowboy who swore he could see a woman wink at him from a mile away. Whether true or tall tale, it speaks to the eerie transparency of the desert atmosphere. Through this hostile terrain lies Skeleton Canyon, a serpentine gash in the earth connecting the Las Animas Valley of New Mexico to Arizona's San Bernardino Valley. Today, visitors find only profound silence, broken occasionally by the lowing of distant cattle or coyotes. But in 1882, this canyon witnessed such violence that its very name became a memorial to massacre. To understand the Skeleton Canyon tragedy, we must first meet William Brocious, though history remembers him better as Curly Bill, the self-proclaimed king of Arizona's outlaw territory. Standing well over 6 feet tall, Curly Bill dominated any room he entered. His skin, bronzed to leather by the desert sun, provided a striking canvas for piercing blue eyes that could shift from jovial warmth to Arctic coldness in a heartbeat. His dark hair, which curled as tightly as sheep's wool, gave him his nickname. His attire announced his profession. Elaborate high-heeled boots with intricate stitching clicked authoritatively on wooden floors. An enormous white sombrero crowned his imposing frame. Most notably, he wore twin gun belts in a distinctive crisscross fashion, each holster cradling a well-oiled .44 caliber revolver. Curly Bill operated from Gaileyville, a remote settlement tucked into a canyon of the Chiricahua Mountains. The town's location made it perfect for outlaws, so far from law enforcement that the badge might as well have been on another planet. From this natural fortress, Curly Bill ran his empire of selective banditry. He claimed to rob only the wealthy, though his definition proved remarkably flexible. Any Mexican smuggling operation automatically qualified for his attention. In summer 1882, word reached Gaileyville that set every outlaw's heart racing. Mexican bandits had accumulated proceeds from numerous robberies into one massive shipment, planning to move everything through Skeleton Canyon in August. The rumored value exceeded anything previously transported through the territory. Recognizing the opportunity of a lifetime, Curly Bill chose Hugh Hunt for infiltration. Hughes possessed the perfect combination. Mixed heritage gave him a swarthy complexion, allowing him to pass for Mexican, while fluent Spanish eliminated communication barriers. More importantly, Hughes could make friends quickly and naturally. Hughes crossed into Mexico, adopting the persona of a drifter seeking work. He haunted cantinas where smugglers gathered, buying drinks and sharing stories. Gradually, he worked into their confidence, participating in tequila toasts and commiserating about their dangerous profession. His patience paid spectacular dividends. Hughes confirmed the August passage through Skeleton Canyon and learned details that made Curly Bill's eyes glitter. The cargo included diamonds stolen from a Monterey bank, religious artifacts pillaged from churches, and enough gold and silver to outfit an army. Conservative estimates place the total value at $3 million. Hughes returned to Gaileyville bursting with intelligence, only to discover Curly Bill had departed on unspecified personal business. Days stretched into weeks as Hughes waited. Each passing night he lay awake thinking about the treasure, $3 million. The number echoed in his mind with increasing insistence. Gradually, a treacherous thought took root. Why share such wealth with Curly Bill? Hughes began recruiting conspirators. First came Zwing Hunt, a veteran mule handler whose expertise with pack animals would prove essential. Next, Billy Grounds, a 19-year-old desperado whose youth belied his reputation with a gun. 5 other Gaileyville inhabitants rounded out the gang. Hughes revealed just enough about the treasure to secure loyalty while maintaining his advantage. He established a blood oath of secrecy, making clear that death awaited anyone who breathed a word of their plans. On a moonless August night, Hughes and his conspirators departed Gaileyville, crossing the San Simon Valley under brilliant stars. They reached Skeleton Canyon at dawn, taking positions among boulder formations that provided concealment and clear fields of fire. The Mexican pack train appeared exactly as predicted, 15 experienced smugglers guarding 30 heavily laden mules. The men rode with watchful alertness, knowing they carried a fortune through hostile territory. They kept weapons loose in holsters, eyes constantly scanning the canyon walls. At midday, the convoy reached the designated rest area near the canyon's exit. A large oak tree spread branches in welcome shade. The smugglers established a defensive perimeter while the main group sought comfort in the oak's shadow. Pack animals grazed on sparse desert grass. Then the canyon erupted in thunder and flame. The first volley came from 3 directions simultaneously, rifle fire echoing off canyon walls. 3 Mexicans dropped instantly. Survivors scrambled for cover as bullets whined off rocks and kicked up dust around them. Panic swept through the convoy. Men shouted contradictory orders while trying to control terrified horses. The mules, driven mad by gunfire, stampeded in all directions, their loads bursting open and scattering treasure across the canyon floor. Gold coins rang against stones, silver bars tumbled into ravines, and precious gems glittered in the dust. Surviving smugglers mounted whatever horses they could catch and fled. Hughes's men continued firing until the last Mexican disappeared into the desert heat. But the human targets were only part of their mission. Emerging from hiding spots, the outlaws began systematically slaughtering pack animals. The canyon echoed with gunfire for another hour. When silence finally descended, the scene resembled a slaughterhouse. Bodies of men and animals lay scattered throughout the canyon, but the outlaws had eyes only for the treasure. According to later testimony, the inventory staggered imagination. A cigar box containing diamonds worth $1 million, 39 gold bars valued at $600,000, scores of silver ingots, 90,000 Mexican gold dollars, countless sacks of gold pieces, and 2 life-size statues of pure gold stolen from a Mexican cathedral. Working efficiently, 2 outlaws excavated a cavity beneath the oak tree while others gathered scattered treasure. Every coin and precious stone was collected and deposited in this temporary cache. Hughes supervised meticulously, ensuring nothing was overlooked. Hughes made clear this burial was temporary until they could return with proper equipment. The gang departed for Galeyville as darkness fell, bound by their code of silence. Death awaited anyone who spoke. But Hughes had learned betrayal's value too well. Days later, he convened a private meeting with Hunt and Grounds, proposing to move the treasure to a more secure location. His true intention: eliminate other gang members from any share. The 3 conspirators hired an elderly Mexican teamster and procured a 4-horse wagon. Returning to Skeleton Canyon, they put the old man to work excavating the cache, promising him a percentage they never intended to pay. Once the treasure was relocated, Hunt and Grounds executed the Mexican, throwing his body into the empty cache. They slaughtered the horses and burned the wagon. Then, in the ultimate betrayal, Hunt and Grounds vanished with the treasure's location, leaving Hughes outmaneuvered at his own game. Hughes waited in Galeyville with growing rage as days passed without word. His fury crystallized into a single purpose: track down Hunt and Grounds, extract the treasure's location, and exact revenge. Hunt and Grounds had taken refuge at Chandler Ranch near Charleston, already wanted for murdering a judge's son. Their plan: lay low until heat dissipated, then return for the treasure. Fate intervened when Deputy Sheriff Healy stumbled upon the fugitives during a routine patrol. The resulting gunfight left Healy dead, Billy Grounds mortally wounded, and Zwing Hunt with 2 bullets through his lungs. Hunt was transported to Tombstone's hospital under armed guard. When Hughes learned of Hunt's capture, he raced toward Tombstone, desperate to extract the treasure's location. But accomplices spirited Hunt away through a rear exit before Hughes arrived. Months later, Hugh Hunt appeared in Tombstone claiming his relative Zwing had been killed by Apache raiders. He led authorities to a fresh grave in the Swiss Helm Mountains. The authorities accepted the story, closing the case. But Zwing Hunt wasn't dead. He had escaped to Mexico, where he spent years in exile, his wounded lungs never healing. The elaborate deception had provided safe passage from Arizona territory. Years later, in San Antonio, Texas, terminal gangrene in Hunt's old wounds brought him to his deathbed. He summoned Hugh Hunt for a final confession. "Find Davis Mountain," he whispered. "From its base, see the rolling plains east and western New Mexico. Go west 1.5 miles to a canyon with many curves. One side has tree-covered hills, the other a vertical cliff. A stream runs through it. Look for a 10-foot waterfall." His voice weakened. Two springs about a mile apart, Silver Spring and Gum Spring. Between them, closer to Silver Spring, find a square stone. On its eastern face are two crosses, one above the other. The treasure lies beneath, $3 million waiting in the earth. But Hunt's landmarks don't exist where they should. There's no Davis Mountain in the area. No springs bear those names. No waterfall matches his description. Did Hunt deliberately mislead his relative? Did fever cloud his memory? Were his directions coded? Or had the treasure been moved again to some location whose secret died with them? In the end, Skeleton Canyon keeps its silence. The bones tell their story of violence and greed, while somewhere in that vast wilderness a fortune awaits, or perhaps only the dream of fortune, which has proven treasure enough for generations of seekers. If you would like to contribute to my channel, join my Patreon community and discover my art print products on my website in the links provided in my description. Also, if you would like a particular image from my videos, give the timestamp for the image, and I will upload it to my website and Patreon. Thank you. Deep in the shadowed canyons of southern Arizona lies what could be the most extraordinary treasure never found. Not gold or silver, but something far more incredible. An arsenal of ancient weapons that would make the world's greatest military museums weep with envy. This is the story of the lost Papago arsenal, a tale of one man's incredible discovery, a secret guarded for over a century, and a mystery that continues to tantalize treasure hunters today. The year was 1882, and Arizona Territory remained a wild frontier. Bancroft, a seasoned prospector who had arrived from New Mexico in 1874, had established mining claims near Covered Wells, about 50 miles south of Casa Grande on what is now the Papago Indian Reservation. But it wasn't gold or silver that would make Bancroft's name echo through Arizona history. It was a discovery so remarkable that adventurers still search the desert for proof today. On that fateful day, Bancroft was traveling his usual route between Casa Grande and his claims through the Santa Rosa Valley. Unusual rock formations several miles to the west caught his experienced eye, weathered surfaces different from the surrounding landscape, promising mineral deposits. Every prospector knew that odd geological features often meant hidden riches. For several days, he picked his way through the rocky outcroppings, searching for ore. Then, as he climbed higher among the rocks, something extraordinary appeared, something that had no business being in this remote corner of the Arizona wilderness. Rising from the desert floor was a rectangular adobe building, 40 to 50 feet long and 15 to 25 feet wide, its walls intact despite decades of brutal desert conditions. But what made Bancroft's pulse quicken wasn't the building's preservation. It was its obvious intentional concealment. The only entrance was a 3-foot square opening, carefully sealed with loose rocks and adobe, camouflaged so expertly it would be invisible to anyone not standing directly in front of it. Bancroft was a prospector to his core, and curiosity drove him to remove the stones and hardened mud blocking the entrance. Finally, the opening was clear. He took a deep breath and squeezed into the darkness beyond. What he found defied every expectation. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Bancroft found himself in the most incredible weapons cache on the North American continent. "There was the greatest sight I ever saw before or since," Bancroft would later write. The building was an arsenal, a carefully organized, meticulously maintained storehouse of firearms spanning centuries of military evolution. The weapons were arranged with museum-like precision. Rows of forked wooden sticks held rifles and muskets so none touched the ground. Along the walls, wooden pegs supported at least 100 different types of pistols, their metal still gleaming despite obvious age. There were Old Queen Anne's, muskets dating to the early 18th century. Old Jaegers, German-made rifles prized for accuracy. Old Hawkins, firearms carried by mountain men and early settlers. The collection included flintlock mechanisms of every description, shotguns and rifles representing nearly every major manufacturer produced in Europe and America. Most incredibly, some weapons appeared to be of Spanish origin, suggesting they might have been carried by conquistadors. I think Cortez had when he invaded Mexico or Coronado might have brought them to this country, Bancroft marveled, realizing he might be looking at firearms that witnessed the birth of European presence in the New World. The arsenal contained what Bancroft estimated to be at least 1,000 individual weapons, a collection that would have equipped a small army. As Bancroft stood transfixed, completely absorbed in cataloging the weapons, he suddenly realized he was no longer alone. Two Papago Indians had discovered the disturbed entrance and quietly positioned themselves between the prospector and his only escape. For a heart-stopping moment, Bancroft understood his curiosity might have sealed his fate. Trespassing in such an obviously sacred location could easily be considered a violation worthy of death, and he was trapped with no possibility of fighting his way out. Fortunately, the prospector had spent enough time in Papago country to be recognized by the tribal members who caught him. His years of respectful interaction with local people likely saved his life. The Papago men allowed him to leave unharmed, but their message was clear: this place was not for outsiders. Days later, Bancroft found himself in conversation with John D. Walker, one of Arizona's most prominent mining operators running the profitable Vehicle mine in Papago territory. Walker was married to a Pima woman, spoke Papago fluently, and was widely regarded as one of the few white men who truly understood the local tribes. When Bancroft described his discovery, Walker's initial reaction was skeptical disbelief. How could such an enormous cache exist without his knowledge, especially given his close tribal relationships? But as they discussed the discovery, an elderly Papago man quietly listening in the store spoke up. In halting English, he confirmed that Bancroft's arsenal did indeed exist, exactly as described. The old man's testimony transformed Walker's skepticism into amazement. "You must lead a charmed life," Walker told Bancroft. "If any other white man ever got in there, he didn't live to tell about it. I've heard about such a place for a long time and have asked several Indians to take me there, but none of them will." Walker's words carried particular weight because of his unique position. If someone with his connections and respected status among the tribes couldn't gain access to the arsenal, it suggested the location was protected by the most serious cultural taboos the Papago people could devise. The existence of such a weapons cache might seem impossible, but historical records provide compelling evidence for how the Papago could have accumulated such a collection. First contact with European weapons occurred in the late 1600s through Spanish missionaries and soldiers. The 1751 Papago Pima uprising against Spanish colonial authority resulted in numerous skirmishes where many Spanish weapons fell into native hands. Throughout the 1800s, the Papago continued conflicts with Spanish and Mexican authorities, raids that netted horses, cattle, and additional firearms. Most significantly, during the latter half of the 19th century, the Papago became allies of the United States in the war against Apache raiders. Territorial authorities actively armed Papago warriors with modern rifles and ammunition to protect settlements and trade routes. This alliance meant the Papago had legitimate access to current military firearms for several decades. Combined with weapons acquired through centuries of previous conflicts, these could easily have formed an impressive arsenal. The cultural context supports Bancroft's discovery. Anthropological studies document that the Papago traditionally cached native weapons, clubs, shields, and bows in caves and rock shelters near enemy territory. Building a special structure for valuable firearms would be entirely consistent with established cultural practices. Father Bonaventure Obliser, a Franciscan priest working among the Papago since 1910, possessed unparalleled knowledge of tribal traditions. When consulted about Bancroft's arsenal, he admitted never hearing of such a cache but stated, "I think there is a good chance one exists." Father Bonaventure pointed to a specific crisis in the late 1870s when tensions between the Papago, Pima, and white settlers escalated until Arizona Territorial Militia was called from Prescott to prevent imminent war. When militia arrived, they found tribes appearing peaceful with no visible weapons. This suggests the arsenal might have served as a hidden staging area where weapons could be quickly concealed when military forces appeared, then retrieved if conflict became unavoidable. Today, more than a century after Bancroft's discovery, the lost arsenal continues capturing imaginations and inspiring desert expeditions. Despite systematic investigation of numerous odd-looking rock formations and conversations with Papago tribal members, no trace of the adobe building has been found. This absence doesn't necessarily disprove Bancroft's account. While dry climate might protect metal weapons for decades, adobe construction is vulnerable to freeze-thaw cycles and flash floods. If the building existed, roof and walls may have collapsed, adobe gradually melting back to earth. Even after decades underground, iron and brass weapons would likely survive in dry desert conditions. Modern searches face challenges Bancroft never encountered. Federal law prohibits trespassing on reservation land without permits, and the Papago Tribal Council has exclusive authority over archaeological activities. Anyone seeking the weapons cache must obtain official permission and agree that any discoveries belong to the Papago people. Welcome to Southwest Desert, where we uncover the most captivating lost wealth stories from across the American Southwest landscape. I'm your host, Alan. Imagine discovering gold so rich that you could pluck it from the walls with your bare hands. Now imagine being hunted down and killed for that discovery, your secret sealed beneath a flat stone and the ashes of a campfire, hidden for nearly a century in one of Arizona's most unforgiving terrains. Today, we venture into the shadow of the rugged Four Peaks Mountains to unravel the mystery of Iritaba's treasure, a lost mine that may still be waiting for someone brave enough, or perhaps lucky enough, to rediscover it. The year was 1952. Colby Thomas, an aging mining engineer with decades of successful operations across Arizona and Mexico, found himself face to face with an 86-year-old Apache Indian known as Iritaba, or Puncher Bob, to the local ranchers. Despite his advanced blindness and age, Puncher Bob's mind was sharp with secrets, one secret in particular that he had guarded for most of his long life. But time was running out for both men, and perhaps that's why Bob finally decided to share the location of a gold mine of extraordinary wealth, one that white men had discovered and died for before Bob was even born. Puncher Bob had earned his nickname working as a horse and cow wrangler in the Four Peaks area for most of his life. The rugged terrain east of Phoenix was his home, and he knew every wash, every ridge, and every dangerous ravine. He also knew Colby Thomas, and over the years, a friendship had formed between the Apache elder and the mining engineer. Thomas had shown kindness to Bob, offering help when needed, never judging the old man for his heritage or his past. It was this friendship, coupled with Bob's advancing age and deteriorating health, that finally loosened his tongue about the gold. What Thomas heard next was the stuff of treasure hunters' dreams. Puncher Bob laid out precise instructions for finding the lost mine, a location several miles to the east of Hughes Well in central Arizona. The directions seemed straightforward enough. Go by way of the Bush Highway to the sign that marks the turnoff to Hughes Ranch, then proceed to the Hughes Well. At this point, there is a junction of two washes. Take the southerly wash about 5 miles east. Here, there will be evidence of an old digging in the side of the wash. Climb out of the wash onto the bench and seek the biggest Palo Verde tree in sight. At the base of the tree measure 20 feet southwest. The opening of the mine is at that point. Despite being over 80 years old himself, Thomas couldn't resist the lure of one final strike. The passion for discovery, the thrill of the hunt, mining was in his blood. He stopped in Mesa to reconfirm the directions with Puncher Bob, who was living there with his son, and then set out alone into the wilderness. The journey began on dirt roads that would challenge even today's off-road vehicles. Thomas camped that night by the well, knowing that come morning he would have to continue on foot into increasingly hostile terrain. And hostile it was. The next day brought a 5-mile trek through a wash where Thomas discovered rich gold float, pieces of rock containing visible gold that had been carried downstream from their source. By noon, hope was high. Thomas had found the old diggings at the edge of the wash, exactly as described. He made his way onto the bench above, but that's when the treasure hunt turned into what Thomas would later describe as a nightmare. The landscape was brutally unforgiving, thick with manzanita brush, poisoned with arsenic and infested with rattlesnakes that seemed to appear from nowhere in the Arizona heat. And then there was the problem of the landmark, the largest Palo Verde tree. In a land scattered with these distinctive green-bark trees, how could one determine which was truly the largest? Thomas searched until the sun began to sink, climbing higher to check the next bench, but finding nothing. With water running low and his elderly body exhausted, he reluctantly returned to his car for the night. A second day of searching yielded no better results. Disappointed and confused, Thomas drove back to Mesa, convinced he must have misunderstood the directions. But Puncher Bob was adamant. Thomas had been in exactly the right place. It was then that the old Apache revealed the full, blood-soaked history of the mine. Nearly 100 years earlier, around the 1850s, 2 white prospectors from Tucson ventured into Apache territory, what we now know as the Four Peaks area. Against all odds, they discovered something extraordinary, a natural blowout hole in the earth, lined with decomposed quartz that was literally loaded with gold. For several days, they worked in secrecy, extracting the richest pieces, carefully collecting all tailings and disposing of them in the wash to hide evidence of their work. They covered the entrance with brush and departed for Tucson with their burros heavily laden with treasure. But the Apache eyes were watchful. The tribe, fiercely protective of their lands during this period of increasing white encroachment, had observed the miners' activities with growing resentment. When the 2 men returned months later to collect more of the gold, they met a violent end at the hands of Puncher Bob's father and other tribal warriors. The Apaches, determined that no other outsiders would benefit from this discovery, sealed the entrance to the shallow tunnel with a large flat rock. To further disguise their work, they built a fire over the site, leaving what appeared to be nothing more than the ashes of an abandoned campfire. Years later, the young Iritaba, driven by curiosity and youthful daring, defied tribal law and returned to the site. He propped up the rock and broke off pieces of the gold-laden quartz for himself. When discovered, he was severely punished by the tribe, which by then had been relocated to the San Carlos Reservation. Despite working as a rancher in the Four Peaks area for decades afterward, Bob never returned to the mine again, until old age, illness, and need drove him to share its location with Colby Thomas. Thomas was determined to make another attempt, but his first exhausting search had taken a toll on his health. After recovering several months later, He enlisted the help of Ed Abbott, a fellow prospector who had successfully worked the old gunsight mine. On their return visit, Thomas remained at the well while Abbott searched the area. Abbott's search revealed something unexpected, a newly marked claim and fresh digging at the edge of the wash. Had Puncher Bob shared his secret with someone else? The claim complicated matters as it overlapped the area where they believed the blowout to be located. Upon returning to Mesa, they discovered another setback. Bob and his son had moved with no forwarding address. Thomas decided to wait, hoping the unknown prospector would eventually abandon the claim. But time waits for no one, especially men in their 80s. In 1952, at 89 years of age, Colby Thomas passed away without making his final big strike. The flat rock, if it still exists, continues to guard the entrance to the abandoned diggings, and the Four Peaks gold mine remains lost to this day. But the story doesn't end there. The Four Peaks area continues to draw prospectors and treasure hunters, all hoping to be the one to finally decode Puncher Bob's directions and uncover the hidden wealth. The clues remain tantalizingly specific yet frustratingly vague. A southerly wash 5 miles east of Hughes Well, evidence of old diggings at the edge of the wash, the largest Palo Verde tree on the bench above, 20 feet southwest from that tree, and somewhere beneath all that, a flat rock covering an entrance possibly still disguised by the ashes of a century-old campfire. The physical evidence that Thomas discovered, the rich gold float in the wash, suggests that somewhere upstream, a source of gold does indeed exist. Whether it's the legendary blowout hole described by Puncher Bob or some other deposit, something in those rugged mountains once yielded gold of exceptional quality. Today, the Four Peaks area looks much as it did when Thomas made his fateful search. The landscape remains harsh and unforgiving, a testing ground for even the most experienced outdoorsmen. The area is now protected as part of the Four Peaks Wilderness within the Tonto National Forest, adding legal complications to any modern search efforts. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan for another Southwest Gold story. Check out my large catalog of Southwest videos and playlists on historical tales, legends, lost gold stories, and adult bedtime stories. If you like a certain image from my videos, tell me in comments and give timestamp. Happy trails. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.